Hello everybody, my name is Mitch and today we are going over the full card fight prediction for UFC Fight Night, Cannonier versus Gastellum. We do go over all of the picks first and then we'll talk about the reasons why after. If you're into that, feel free to hit the subscribe button so that you can see the weekly videos. Now before we get started, if you happen to see my video on Derek Lewis versus Cyril Gane, I apologize. I hope no one used my picks to make any bets, place any bets. I know I did. But anyway, you win or you learn. We'll be better moving forward. Let's go ahead and get started. Abdul, Razak, Hassan, Lyanna, Jojua, Roosevelt, Roberts, Mana, Martinez, Biamaleki, Sasha, Palat, Nikov, Marco Madsen, Louis Saldana, Vince Pichelle, Parker Porter, William Knight, Brian Kelleher, Alejandra Pantoja, and Kelvin Gastellum. Those are my picks. Now let's get into the reasons why. The odds for the event for those of you who want that. Abdul Razak Al Hassan versus Antonio Braganito. For Abdul, it has not looked pretty. He's lost 3 out of his last 3. He does have an impressive win over Nico Price as his most recent win. However, for Antonio, it does not look much better. He is not very active, and then when he does compete, he appears to be losing, whether it's the grappling or the fights. I suppose he does have that grappling win versus Pedro Grizzi, but at any rate, a lack of activity, it's hard to trust. I'm going with Abdul Razak Al Hassan with this one. Courtney Casey versus Lyanna Jojua. For Courtney Casey's side of things, this fight against JJ Aldrich, I feel like she was really able to get pressured up and lose those rounds due to not being able to do anything about that. Although she did look really good in the stand-up. I feel like Lyanna is going to be able to implement a similar plan. She likes to move forward and be physical, very good on the ground. I feel like this could be one of those fights where Courtney Casey may be doing more damage and appearing like she's winning the fight overall, but Lyanna, I think, will be able to get 2 out of the 3 rounds and win a decision here. I'm going with Lyanna Jojua. Roosevelt Roberts versus Ignacio Bajamandes. I like Roosevelt Roberts. I feel like he is pretty well rounded in there, and I expect this fight to go the distance. Having said that, Ignacio seems to prefer fights to go a shorter amount of time. He loses a split decision here and a unanimous decision against Salvador Becerra. The 2 likely scenarios I see is Ignacio getting a sick knockout or Roosevelt Roberts kind of grinding this out over the course of 3 rounds. We see here that Roosevelt does not have a history of getting knocked out necessarily, and I don't see that happening this fight. I'm going to go with Roosevelt Roberts. Mana Martinez versus Jesse Strader. For Mana Martinez, I feel like he is a patient KO artist. He kind of stalks his opponent and lands really good counter punches, really picks his shots and is very precise. I almost feel like he's more precise than he is powerful, not to take anything away from his power. On the other end, we have Jesse Strader. I wasn't too impressed with his UFC debut, but maybe that's because Montel Jackson just made him look bad. He otherwise looks like a finisher in his own right, but I am going with Mana Martinez. I feel like he can implement kind of the same similar game plan as Montel Jackson. Montel was also pretty patient and just landed some really nice counter punches and got Strader out of there. I'm going with Mana Martinez with this one. Biamaleki versus Joziani Nunes. I looked into it and I found that Biamaleki is a credentialed kickboxer, and she is also a no-gi champion in grappling, I think in Scandinavia. She is currently 2-1 in the UFC, I suppose, if you count the exhibition bout. Otherwise, she is undefeated, which I suppose her pro MMA record shows she is undefeated. On the other end, we have Joziani Nunes. One thing that's interesting, I noticed she does not show a reach or a last weigh-in. Her opponents have suspect history up until her last 2 with 4-0 and 3-0 records, but she did fight an opponent of 0-1, 0-6, and 1-3. I honestly don't know too much about Joziani Nunes. I'm going with Biamaleki with this one. Ramis Brahimaj versus Sasha Palatnikov. Perhaps it's recency bias, but for Ramis, this fight against Max Griffin, it just did not look great. I didn't like what I saw with that one. On the other end, with Sasha, I did like what I saw in his last recent bouts. I feel like while he did lose to Impa, he overcame adversity. Impa got a takedown pretty early. Sasha was able to stand back up, which I thought was impressive. And also against Louis Cauchy, I remember he weathered quite a storm to come back and win that fight. I am going to go with Sasha with this fight. Clay Guida versus Mark O'Madsen. Clay Guida has had a great career, but it is towards the end of it now, 36-20. He is 39 years old, recently winning against Michael Johnson. I was surprised to see him win that fight, I suppose. On the other end, we have Mark O'Madsen. His nickname is the Olympian for a good reason. He is an Olympic level wrestler, and I expect him to wrestle the hell out of Clay Guida in this one. I know Clay is a very good wrestler in his own right, but I feel like there are levels to it. Look at these many unanimous decisions and or ground and pound finishes, submission finishes on Olympian Fight Night, whatever that is. I'm going with Mark O'Madsen, the Olympian. Louis Saldana versus Austin Lingo. Louis Saldana, it's hard not to like him. He looked pretty good in his debut against Jordan Griffin, I thought, and he looks very technical and very good striking in there. We have Austin Lingo on the other side, very gritty and will show forward pressure and may suffocate Saldana in this one. Ultimately, Louis Saldana is born in Des Moines, Iowa. That is important to me. I'm going with Louis Saldana. Vince Pichelle versus Austin Hubbard. Despite the 38 years old here, I'm going to go with Vince Pichelle. I feel like he just doesn't make mistakes in there, and he's just too smart of a fighter. When I see his fights, he just seems very aware. His most recent loss is to Gregor Gillespie there. On the other end, we have Austin Hubbard. He seems much more physical in there, and perhaps he's just going to be the younger, hungrier fighter, but I feel like he's also kind of the sloppier fighter in terms of his decision-making and striking. With that being said, I do think Pichelle will be able to capitalize. I'm going with Vince Pichelle with this one. Chase Sherman versus Parker Porter. Chase Sherman finishes a small heavyweight that fights at light heavyweight now, and then gets outclassed by Andrei Arlovsky. Plus, it's hard to get behind him with this terrible, terrible nickname of the Vanilla Gorilla. So we are going to go with Parker Porter with this one. William Knight versus Fabio Charont. For Fabio Charont, I watched one of his fights before the UFC. I don't remember which one it was, but he essentially catches his opponent coming in and gets a submission. He tries to do the same thing against Alonzo Menefield, I noticed. Alonzo comes in and he tries to get him with the guillotine choke. It ends up with him losing position and getting submitted himself. William Knight, I feel like, has that kind of neck to where it's hard to go for a submission and to get a good choke around for it. And I feel like William Knight will be able to just be really physical and take down Charont at will. So I'm going to go with William Knight for this one. Brian Kelleher versus Domingo Polarte. Brian Kelleher, I feel like, has shown that he is near the top of an already stacked division. On the other end, we have Domingo Polarte. Hasn't shown quite as much. A loss and a no contest. This no contest, I think, was originally a loss, but Journey Newson did test positive for marijuana, so that fight got overturned. I did see Brian Kelleher tweeting about how he may bet on himself for his next fight. Now, call me crazy, but I do kind of like the confidence if he does indeed do that. But at any rate, I'm going with Brian Kelleher with or without the bet on himself. Alejandro Pantoja versus Brandon Royval. For Pantoja's side, he's really just all around very good and only 31 years old. I feel like without seeing his fights, you could just look at the history and see how good of a fighter he is. He's lost to Askar Askarov and Davison Figueiredo. He does have a win over Brandon Moreno, which is aging very well, as Moreno is the current champion. I feel like Pantoja is one of those fighters that does everything very well and capitalizes on mistakes and is just a very smart fighter in there. He's very patient and picks his shots. On the other end, we have Brandon Royval. He's somewhat new to the UFC. I feel like he has a crazy, wild striking style. Now, while it does lead to these crazy finishes, I feel like it also allows openings, and Pantoja is the type of fighter that just will capitalize on all of those openings. In this fight here, I know that Brandon Moreno got a takedown after Brandon Royval did a spinning attack, and I think that takedown led to the end of the fight. At any rate, I do think it is likely that Brandon Royval does something kind of crazy and wild and Alejandro Pantoja capitalizes on it. I'm going with Alejandro Pantoja with this fight. Jared Cannonier versus Kelvin Gastelum. For Jared Cannonier, actually both of these fighters recently losing to Robert Whittaker as their last loss. For Jared Cannonier, we see that he finishes fights rather quickly, not going to the third round for any of these wins. Having said that, I do like Kelvin Gastelum to kind of avoid the power shots and do a lot of wrestling. Try to tire Jared Cannonier out that way, and just take away his strong weapons. If Kelvin Gastelum does not look to pressure and grapple, I would be surprised. I am pretty curious how 15 minutes of pure stand-up would go between the two, but I do like Kelvin Gastelum a lot more if he implements his wrestling in this one. So for the main event, I am picking Kelvin Gastelum. Thanks for watching this video. Feel free to leave a comment and let me know who you think is going to win any of these fights. I'll throw some timestamps in the comments or in the description. I know some of you guys have been asking about that. But that's it for me. I will see you guys Saturday. Peace.